iKangaroo's history short about the possible origin of Valentine's Day, while I make a short visit to Santa Maria and Cosmedin, a church in Rome that claims to have the head of St. Valentine himself. First, let's go to the most ancient part of Rome. Okay, here's how Rome looks now. But, to get us more in the mood, let's travel back 1700 years or so to see how Rome looked when Valentine was living and when the Romans were celebrating the Lupercalia, which is a fertility festival that may have been absorbed into the Christian feast day. You should now recognize the Circus Maximus, which was Rome's largest sports stadium, where they held the chariot races. I'll cover the circus more in depth at another time in one of our iPhone applications. Moving to the north end of the circus, you will see that there is an open area right in front of the Tiber River. In ancient times, this was a cattle market and it was called the Forum Bararium. Today, you can still find Rome's oldest intact temples, dating from 200 BC. The circular temple is the Temple of Hercules the Victor, and the other is the Temple to Portunus, who is a Roman river god. From here, you'll easily be able to see the belfry. That is Santa Maria and Cosmedin. When you enter into the porch area of Santa Maria and Cosmedin, you'll immediately look left, and you'll probably recognize the Bocca della Verita. The legend about the Bocca della Verita is that if you tell a lie with your hand in the Bocca's mouth, that you'll get your hand bitten off. You might remember that from Roman Holiday, when Gregory Peck and Audrey Hepburn were on their moped trip around Rome, and he pretended to get his hand bitten off. Now let's go into the church. Santa Maria and Cosmedin is a classic Roman basilica. For the Romans, a basilica was a public building where administrative functions were carried out, exactly like a modern city hall. A basilica is a building style that consists of a main hall called a nave, at the end of which is an arch called an apse. In Santa Maria, you can see the two rows of colonnades that separate the nave from the two side aisles. Along the side aisles, there are niches cut out. Whereas this church was never a Roman basilica, it is an excellent example of Christian builders adapting the basilica building style. Santa Maria and Cosmedin has been built and rebuilt a few times since about 1100 AD. So no, it was not around during the Roman Empire. Besides being an example of a recycled building style, the basilica, it is also an excellent example of actual material recycling, in that it was easier for builders to use marble, bricks, wood, etc. from existing buildings than to go out and get new materials. During the Middle Ages, which were approximately 800 to 1500 AD, buildings dedicated to pagan gods had zero value. So, it was common for these buildings to be stripped of their materials. Just looking around, here in the church, you can see that none of the columns match. This is the reason why. Another example of this is the impressive floor, which was pieced together from a multitude of sources. The floor is arguably one of the most beautiful floors in all of Rome, which doesn't get too much credit because people in Rome are usually looking up at ceilings and such. And this is most likely how the church gets its name Cosmedin, which is derived from a Greek word meaning beautiful. Moving over into the left hall, you will find the macabre relic of Valentine's Day, which is said to be the head of a 3rd century priest named Valentine, who was bludgeoned to death for continuing to perform the Christian rite of marriage for Roman soldiers at a time when it was illegal for them to marry, because the Roman army was in a personnel crunch of sorts, and marriage had complicated recruitment. Stories vary, but that's the gist. How the relic ended up here is anyone's guess. But Valentine's Day is another great example of Christian recycling of old, non-Christian pagan holidays. Besides being very close to the circus and the Forum Bararium, Santa Maria and Cosmedin is just meters away from the base of the Palatine Hill, which was the address of the Roman emperors. But before Augustus lived on the Palatine Hill, the legend goes that there was a small cave at the base of this hill between the Tiber and the Palatine. The cave was called the Lupercal and was very important to the Romans. Each mid-February, the Romans celebrated a fertility festival called the Lupercalia, dedicated to Faunus, the Roman version of the Greek god Pan. On the 15th of February, the priest of Lupercus performed a sacrifice of a dog and 2 goats, apparently they're very fertile creatures, in a cave, the very same cave, at the base of the Palatine Hill, where the she-wolf suckled Romulus and Remus. The goats were then skinned, with their pelts being made into tunics and whips. Young men would then strip themselves, put on the goat tunics, and run through the streets whipping young women with the goat skins. Believe it or not, the women actually wanted to be whipped because this was supposed to be a prevention against sterility and painful childbirths. In one form or another, this fertility festival was celebrated until close to 500 AD when it was finally outlawed. Modern Valentine's Day seems to have absorbed a lot of the fertility sentiment, even though, yes, it has lost the dog blood-soaked goat skin whips. This is just one theory of the origin of our Sweetheart Day. But since the cave, which was the focal point of a fertility festival that existed for centuries, is only meters from Santa Maria and Cosmedin, it seems plausible as to maybe this is the reason why the church has Valentine's skull. If for no other reason than the spirit of the area wants to keep its fertility festival mojo, no matter what the religion. Even though the exact location of the wolf's den is still debated, we do know that it is very close to this church, and that this area was a center point of an important Roman fertility festival for centuries, even after Christianity became the status quo. But beyond that, the next time you're in Rome, I highly recommend you visit that little basilica called Santa Maria in Cosmedin. It has so many examples of how Rome has adapted itself over the course of the last 2,000 years. You can see an example of a Roman town hall, learn what happened to all that marble of ancient Rome, and get a glimpse of St. Valentine's head. All while only being meters away from where Romulus and Remus were suckled by the she-wolf. But if you get there at 10 o'clock on Sunday, you'll have to be quiet, because yes, it is still a functioning church. Thanks for listening, and if you're going to Europe, don't forget to visit ikangaroo.com.